very happy to welcome Stefanie Hirsbrunner and Nick Mhlongo, I hope I pronounced that all right, for a conversation around book festivals or literature festivals. I'm happy that you accepted my invitation, and I'm looking forward to, I know the African Book Festival in Berlin quite well, but less the South African ones. And let's see how we bring that together. Yep. So first I will present you. Stefanie Hirsbrunner is a German political scientist and cultural manager and activist also, I would say. Since 2018, she is director of the Berlin African Book Festival, and she also runs a bookstore, which is called Intercontinental, that specializes in African and Afrodiasporic literatures. Of course, you're not doing all of this alone. There is a whole team. Maybe you will talk about the team later on also. And then Nick Mhlongo, most of you, I believe, know him as an acclaimed novelist and short story writer from South Africa. He is currently living in Berlin, and he co-founded the Gauteng International Book Festival in 2022. He now also collaborates with the African Book Festival Berlin, and you just told me that there is a third book festival you are involved in. You can tell us more about that. So right now, Nick is also a member of the advisory board for the Berlin African Book Festival. So maybe because we are in Berlin, let's start with Berlin. And to start with, I would like, Stefanie, I would like to ask you, can you please tell us the story, how the idea even to create an African Book Festival in Berlin came about, and what was the journey of this festival so far?
Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really nice to be part of this workshop, and I'm really happy to be back in Humboldt University as well, where I also used to study. I'm really a Berlin born and bred person, so it's nice that you introduced me as such as well. So I mentioned this because I think it's also important to know where a person comes from and how we learn certain things or how we experience certain things. And very often, especially the larger initiatives, have started with a very small, maybe garage or one single person that thought, I need to do something different, or I would like to see something different happening. And that is totally the case in our story as well. When I went to school or later on at the university, I'm still that generation that was taught mainly when it comes to the African continent by white men who were experts in their fields. And while I do not question whether they are experts or not, I personally just wanted to also hear other voices. And that was a significant problem for me when I was a younger person, still, especially in the university later on. And it led to me talking to others and, do you also feel the same way? The German media also has a tendency, I can give an example here, 2011, when the revolution happened in Egypt. It was significant for me because I followed it all on screen. I was heavily pregnant, unable to move, so I was really in front of that screen at that time. And I noticed that it was so excluding Egypt voices. The logical approach for me was to hear what Egypts are saying, to what is happening on the ground, Tahrir Square, and so on and so forth. And all I saw were voices that were German Goethe Institute, German reporters that were sent to Cairo. And that is always the same motivation for me to say, it's all fine. I'm also German, I'm also in that field, but I also want to hear other voices. And I would, especially when something happens on the ground, like to hear people who are from there, who have a very different perspective and experience than from my own. And that was motivating the festival as well. It started as a literature conference that we did, which was packed, even to my own total surprise. There was a demand. and I could see that it's not only me who thinks like that, and we have to open the stages. And then I thought, well, that's really something that I can do. I can build stages, and I can open doors and all that. And that's when I found other people who joined me in founding the African Book Festival, and it is exactly that since. So we provide the stage, we provide the infrastructure, we provide funding, for example. We organize everything that has to come from Germany to make the festival happen. And then there's always African experts from the literary scene who curate, who bring the program together, but also who are on stage, who moderate, who read, who bring their literature, which is a joy for a book nerd like me, because every year there are so many books that I don't know yet. So I'm also profiting personally from that a lot. Yeah, and that I think is pretty much the journey that the festival has taken since 2018. That was the first issue, and since then it's an annual festival which has grown into something quite large.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Now, looking at South Africa, Nick, of course, South Africa has one of the most vibrant and large literary scenes, also a strong publishing industry and book market, stronger than many other African countries. And when you co-founded the Gauteng International Book Festival with Lorraine Sittel, who is still the director now. Yeah. I mean, there were already a number of literary festivals in the country going on, notably several in Cape Town, but also in Durban. So what was the reason to found another one, and what's different for the Gauteng Festival compared to the others?
Okay, thank you for the question, and thanks for inviting me, inviting us to this forum. We are thankful for that. Coming back to the question, the Gauteng Literary Festival came into being after the so-called the dissolving of one of the most important festivals for Black people, which was called Abantu Festival. Abantu Festival was founded by a person, a writer called Thando Mgolozana, who his famous books is called, one of his famous books or debut books is called A Man Who's Not a Man. So he founded that festival with others, of course. And I think he founded it around 2017. And then how he founded it was during the time of the movement in South Africa called the decolonizing movement, which started, I think, at the universities, most notably at the University of Cape Town, for instance. People or students also, I would say, they tried to demolish the apartheid relics, like, for instance, roads, memorials, statues, and whatever. And so that was the movement which fought for the inclusion of Black people into, different spheres of life, more importantly, academia. And the reason I'm saying that, you'll find that these are the people that said, for instance, we cannot go on. There's a lot of African writers that are there, but the syllables in African literature or English literature is still colonial, for instance. So we need to decolonize and then get this more new syllable that will incorporate everyone in South Africa at this particular moment. So he started that festival from that particular movement around, I think its first inning was in 2017. So of course it ran well. It became number one book festival in South Africa to go to. Of course it had some controversies around it. Other people thought it was, also racist. Why were they saying so? Is because at some point, as the festival went by, the directors and everyone decided that, okay, this is should be a safe space for Black people to talk about our things. So meaning that we cannot invite white authors who have been invited every time in other festivals, to talk about the same issue. So here we're speaking about a new issue, which is about Black people, And then, and there was also other controversies. It became so big, the festival, that everyone was sort of a pilgrimage, for literary pilgrimage in South Africa. So until there was a scandal that happened, I think in 2020 or 2021, involving the director. And then that scandal had to do something with gender-based violence, of course. Mm-hmm. And then the festival died. Mm-hmm. So when the festival died, we realized that, people still want to go to a festival. And then that festival actually happened in Soweto, which was the first festival to happen in Soweto, which is for the benefit of others who don't know Soweto. It's more like one of the bigger metropolitan area of South Africa. I think maybe 2 million people or something like that. So people flocked into that festival, and it introduced even people that were not necessarily readers to be readers. Mm-hmm. So we decided, let's continue with this legacy that was left but in a different way. So that's how the Gauteng festival came into being.
The Gauteng one is called an international book festival. What does international mean in that context? Is it Pan-African? Is it with African diasporas from all over the world?
All that inclusive. Actually, we tried to look into Abantu, and we thought, okay, some of the things that, for instance, I didn't agree with from Abantu, for instance, was the exclusion of other people from the festival itself. For me, I thought festival should be inclusive to everyone. It's that's the area whereby everyone come and debate issues. We are introduced to whoever comes from wherever, it's a literary festival. So when we phrase it as an international festival, of course, we wanted to include everyone, even on the diaspora, Africans on the diaspora. But the main focus are the people that, because of the limited funds that we had, was for people that live around, the people that we could easily bring to the festival itself. So, in the name, it's an inclusive festival.
Okay, thanks. So Stephanie, the African Book Festival in Berlin, so far, every year it has a theme or a region that is being focused on. And it also used to have an African or Afrodiasporic curator. Now you have a team of advisors. It has changed a little bit. But I would like to know a little bit more about how the topics, the foci of the different festivals are selected, chosen, what is really the role the curator plays for the festival or now the advising team, and how does the collaboration between the Berlin team and you in particular as a director and the curators and writers also who come to the festival, how does it work?
The idea, of course, to have an African book festival in itself is already something that I found a bit problematic when we started. But how do you name it? It's the same thing with African literature. African literature is not a genre. It is not something that, but I have to operate with the term nonetheless. So just to make this festival from the get-go as specific as possible, and also to not water it down and just present any African person basically or any book. You have to also give it, of course, a specific focus and to make the conversations also relevant. For example, it happens not not random. It happens very often that still, especially in Germany, I'm invited to moderate something, and then I'm invited to moderate the Nigeria panel. And I'm saying, what is that? It's not like, what is the topic? Who are the people? So can we be a bit more, intelligent about it? So, and that was the idea, to bring in someone, first of all, from the continent, to bring the perspective, as I said earlier, but also the genre, for example. Last year, we had a curator from Ghana, so we focused on her. She's in speculative fiction, so already, the path was clear, like in this direction we are going, so you bring in a focus point, and then she brings in the network as well, the writers that she adores, which is always interesting also, because of course we are all you're all readers, not only writers, but good writers are big readers. So they also have their favorites. They try to invite the stars, these people in the particular genre that they think are currently relevant. And then also they bring their topics that they want to talk about. So if I don't read horror, then I cannot create a panel about horror in a particular intelligent way, as I said before. And so this is, of course, the way we work together. And how do we choose the regions? I think the first festival 2018, it was quite clear we go for Nigeria, since the numbers, just because Nigeria is with South Africa, of course, South Africa is different. Nigeria is in production the largest, like the numbers of writers that come out of Nigeria are, of course, compared to all the other regions, significantly higher. And the translations as well. That also, of course, comes through the icon of Chimamanda. She really opened a door there, and that was in 2018 at the height. So it was very clear that we go with Nigeria to create a good impact with the first issue of the festival. And we had a Nigerian-German curator because, again, if you want to promote African literature, unfortunately, the German media has still a focus on the German language, and it is much easier if the curator is able to speak the language, speak German, to also get them into the media to speak and to create platforms to go on the radio. It's just not as easy if it's another language, but it cannot be the reason why we, of course, go for curators who speak German. There are not many. German is not that important as a language. So the main language of the festival is, of course, English. Still, it simply has to do with funding. I would really love to make the festival go into other languages as well, but the translation process in itself would totally ruin us financially. It's not possible so far. I have to just be very honest about that. We had other languages when we went to Angola, for example. So we started in Nigeria. So of course you look into other regions of the continent. And so we had one issue that 1 year that focused on Angola. So the Portuguese language was in the main center of those debates. But of course also local languages often play a role. But it's also I have to say, German debate. Why do people not publish or write in local languages? It's a very German question to ask, simply because you want to be published, also you want to be read. Maybe Nick can speak to that topic later, even much better than I can do. But so it's kind of a logical approach, and it comes also from the audience. So we often, every year we ask the audience, of course, to give feedback, please. And what would you like to see next year? And the audience gives us a lot of ideas. First of all, who they want to see on stage, who are their stars they want to see, and who shall we invite. And secondly, they also have favorite regions or favorite books that are currently circulating, and so on and so forth. So the process of choosing where to go and who to bring is coming from the community itself. And the work between the curator and the board came into being 2 years ago, I think. We started that idea to bring in just more African voices voices that can actually also participate to bring in just more diversity from other parts of the continent. So the continent is large, and work with the curator a little bit more so that it is not just the German Stephanie that has to, deal with the curator, make things happen, but just a pool of ideas. It's just really fruitful to have more people involved in the process and also in the choice of how we do things.
Yeah, great. I would like to bring Nick's perspective on that in, because you have participated in the Berlin African Book Festival, both as a writer presenting your literary work, but now you are also part of the advisory board. So you also have two different experiences with the festival. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that, when Stephanie and other founders thought about creating the board, I thought it was a wonderful idea, because the board's main important thing, I think, was to look into things that are overlooked. It's easier to, for instance, to be biased in terms of who to invite. Yes, South Africa and Nigeria are the prominent powerhouses in terms of literature, but definitely we have to look into, for instance, Lusophone and Francophone areas as well, So also we have to, those are the kind of things that the board looks into to balance, to bring the balance again into it, But I think, again, the most important thing is to what we were talking about in the board, for instance. The aim of the festival should be, one of the aims, main things to do, is to introduce new voices. I think, for instance, also from South African perspective, if you think about South African literature, the voice that comes to mind to other people is Jem Coetzee, Nadine Gordimer, Zeksinda, and whatever. We even forget that there are other people that have to take over from that legacy and continue the legacy of writing. So those are the things. You find that we did the same. We also, for instance, in our festivals, the experience that we bring to the board is the experience that we have seen happening in other, other festivals that have been in my experience. For instance, I'll give you a specific one. My experience in different South African festivals that I've attended was the experience of book clubs, for instance, the importance of book clubs into the festivals. How do you bring that? And with that dynamic, the board itself, one is from one is from Kenya, another one is from Côte d'Ivoire, Nigeria. So what we did was to bring all those kind of, one of the most, I think, is successful, but also, of course, it's a trial, it's still a trial. What we did was to ask to make a call for book clubs around Africa as a whole, to say to them, you can come to the festival. This is what we can do. We can help you with different things, like, for instance, how to apply for a visa, for instance. Of course, it's difficult. Whether they succeeded or not is another story, but that's what we did. And the success of it was the fact that we had in this call more than 100 of book clubs that applied from different countries in Africa, to apply to come to the Berlin, to the African Book Festival in Berlin. So within that, it helps also, to link different book festivals with the Berlin ones, the German-based, book clubs. So in that way, it was successful because we think we had about how many that managed to come, because the call came a little bit late according to them, but we still managed to get about 16 people that came from different book clubs that came, and so that to me is a success in its own. It's a African Book Festival. The linking of African Book Festival to to real African continents, irrespective of the region where you come from, was the most successful one. And I think, as I say, that was a pilot, and then it will hopefully next year we know exactly what the problems were. It even showed us different problems that. Of how to apply the German bureaucracy. It exposed us, most of us, to the German bureaucracy in terms of how one can come to Germany. Like, for instance...
these are issues.
Yeah, those are the issues.
We already talked about it today in the context of London as well.
Exactly. I mean, when we also had a session of book clubs, of a book clubs, for instance, whereby they talk about their reading and writing experiences. They introduced us to new books that we were not aware of. And even the books that we were aware of, but ignoring or putting on the table, thinking that we'll read next year. Those are the books that they taught us how to relook into that. And also the harrowing experiences of Africans trying to come to Berlin. So that is a book in itself. So we, in that way, I think that's how the board, some of the things that the board are involved in, creating that balance, and also making it a point that, African Book Festival in Berlin stands by its name as the African Book Festival in Berlin, attended by lots of Africans here and in Africa and in the diaspora and everyone else. Yeah.
So now you spoke more from the perspective of an organizer. Yeah. I want to come back to your person as a writer for a moment, because you have presented your novels, your short stories, in festivals in South Africa and in Berlin, and also elsewhere in the world, I guess. Yes. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about what's the difference to read in front of an audience in Soweto or in Cape Town and here in Berlin? How do you experience the interaction with the audience?
One of the clear highlight, I think, one of the things that I've realized is that in Berlin, when some people, first of all, people don't mind paying to go to a book launch. And so that's, to me, it's like, wow, it's new, because it's a book launch. We have to put all the stuff around ourselves. We have to organize it ourselves. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing was when in South Africa, for instance, I'm used to talking about literature. But when it comes to Berlin, my experience here in Berlin, it's like people enjoy reading. Mm-hmm. The author has to read, and I'm thinking, I think you might have realized that as I was speaking, I was a bit of a stutterer when I was, mild stutterer when I was, and reading to me, it was a no-no. So going to festivals in Berlin, for instance, and around the world, gave me that experience of how to read. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know how to read well, actually, in my own texts and stuff. So that's the thing about Berlin, but also the culture of reading. So when I first started in South Africa, for instance, my first book was published in 2004. And then because of it was translated also into two of my books, translated into Spanish and Italian, and then the other one into German. Before that, before going around the world, my experience in South Africa was that book clubs actually were mostly existing within white communities. So within black communities, we didn't see a lot of black book clubs. Maybe there would be 2 elite ones and whatever, wine and dine and stuff like that. So one of the first things that happened to me, why I also liked to be in the, it encouraged me to when I go around South African audience to encourage people to form book clubs, was an incident that happened, I think, in 2006. In the first Franschhoek, there's a bigger festival as well in South Africa called Franschhoek, around Cape Town. Mm-hmm. When somebody came to me from the audience, an experienced white woman came to me and then shows me the text that Olive Schreiner, one of the pioneers of African short story, had signed. And that was 1886 or something. And I said, oh, this is my grandmother. It used to be my great-grandmother's book club. And I realized that using this, we can encourage other people to create book clubs to make it a legacy, home legacy for us. He says, I have got lots of this. Actually, in my home, most of my great-grandmother's section, there's all the books are signed by authors because she used to go to those authors. And I thought, what a good idea. Because within that festival, I think there were a majority of the Franschhoek festival were the ones that came to my session, for instance, were mostly belonging to different book clubs. So that is the lesson that I learned from that one. And I thought, okay, when I go to my communities around Soweto and present or whichever festival, I will encourage people to establish, book clubs. Mm-hmm. Right at the moment, what we have more than 1,000 book clubs in South Africa alone. And I'm not saying it's me who made them to be established. I'm just saying that most writers in South Africa and even readers themselves, play a major role in making sure that literacy rate and reading grows within communities that were not necessarily readers. And so that was my main, in South Africa, that was my main lesson and also experience. Then I went to Spain. I think that was 2006. That's when my book had just won a Spanish award. I don't know the name. I cannot pronounce the name. That book called After Tears. So I went there. They invited me to give me the award. But on the queue, for instance, of people that had bought the book
to get a signature,
were school kids that were, maybe less than the age of 13 downwards. And I thought, wow, this is something very, something I've never seen, something that I would love to see happening in my country as well, So that's my experience in different places. So as I'm saying, every place that I went to has got brings me a different experience.
Yeah. I would like to get back to Germany now. Well, I think it's also a long time that I'm observing, right, how African literature is received, distributed in Germany or not. And I would say, I believe that over the last 10 years or so, a lot has changed, and African literatures and cultures in general have gained more visibility in Germany, in particular in Berlin. And of course, the book festival is one very important spot for that. But since you started, also more festivals have sprung up a little bit everywhere in Germany. So I would like to ask you, both of you, how do you explain this kind of more visibility? And in particular in Berlin, my impression is sometimes there is so much going on, maybe is it also too much? And there was one year when accidentally, I think, the African Book Festival and the Afrolution took, say, place at the same time, on the same days, which is kind of a pity because you address the same audiences also. Yeah, but I mean, you mentioned Chimamanda, but she cannot be the only explanation, I believe, for this change in the interest. What would you say?
I think this is a really important question, and it triggers lots of thoughts. So I hope I can touch on a few ones. So I think one that Nick also mentioned by giving these examples from international context is, and from an entrepreneurial point of view, it is very important to always ask who is your audience, like who do you want to attract. And the second is, of course, as I mentioned before, the African continent is so huge, like it is almost an insult to call something an African book festival. It should be a Kenyan book festival, for example, or even smaller than that. Or any other significantly region, like if you want to make the region a focus in itself, like we wouldn't normally do Scandinavian literature festival. Maybe even Scandinavia is kind of small in itself as just regionally compared to geographically compared, but then we would also go and make it much more specific and look into the crime fiction from Sweden, for example. Nobody would question whether there are several festivals or initiatives looking into crime fiction from Sweden. I'm mentioning this because it's kind of popular in Germany, and it has always been and will always be probably. So I absolutely see not the problem in it when there are several initiatives and large initiatives and in different cities, especially in the large cities in Germany, that look into the African continent and present certain stages, certain topics, certain writers. I think it's fantastic. It doesn't necessarily reflect in the literary scene that we have in Germany. So this is another question. I think also in Berlin, even Berlin is large enough to have two festivals happening at the same time, because no, we do not necessarily attract the same audience. We have a different approach on doing things. And while, for example, Eoto in Wedding definitely is more in the area of Abantu, looking into providing a safe space for Black people in Berlin. That is not what the African Book Festival is doing at the same time. So I think all of these initiatives have absolutely are very important, have a right to be there, and can happen at the same time. This is absolutely not a problem. Same with the HKW that you mentioned. I think it's fantastic to have a curator there with African descent. The literature initiatives are very small and, for example, cannot be compared to the International Literature Festival that happens every time in September. And also there are African writers included, but it's always the question of what focus. And yes, if there are 3 African writers, does that really present anything, and how are they presented? So for me, it's not important how many we have, but also the quality of how do we present them and what is the outcome of that also. So the African Book Festival makes it a point to also try to push those books that we present also into the economy itself, because it's not enough to just build the stage and then invite people for 3 days and have everyone have a good time. I think that is not necessarily what a festival what the purpose of a festival is. That would have been a mischance. The German book market is still is very far from being diverse, I have to say. And we have, I want to give a recent example also. We have a new cultural states minister, who has recently promoted a particular book online, which has really put me a bit into shock. It's a shock moment for me to see that he has picked a book that is a mainstream, already bestseller from a big publishing house. That alone, from his office, is something that is a political act. A festival is also a political place. It is always our goal to pick books and then present them to other book industry branches. So very many writers that have come to the African Book Festival, for example, have found either an agency or have found translators or have found a publishing house. Tsitsi Dangarembga was the curator of the second African Book Festival. She was almost forgotten in the German mainstream media, I would like to say, even though she's an absolute icon in Zimbabwe and in the African literature scene in itself. Her book was published in the 80s and then ran out of print, and it was really badly done. I also have to say it was labeled as a woman's literature and also put in as the translation was. So now she found a new publisher and they translated it freshly and they put it out in the market again. And then, she was given a big stage, and then, she was kind of pushed back into the German mainstream. She won the Freedom Prize from the book industry. So, and now, I think Tsitsi Dangarembga's name is known, like we know who she is, even in the bigger mainstream and especially also in the book scene. But the book scene is not diverse, and I personally appreciate every single initiative that comes up in the country. It also speaks to the question of how much can we maintain? Because if I see that, right, what you just described, is it, you said boom, no? You used the word
No,
boom.
I asked if
it's a boom, right? Yeah.
More visibility. Yeah. Can we call it a boom or not?
And I hear that question a lot because they, like with the Tsitsi Dangarembga example, is that something that, or even in a larger sense, we had a Nobel Prize of Literature given to an African person. We had at the same time the Booker Prize, International Booker Prize. We had Prix Goncourt in the same year. So we had different prizes given to African writers from all of the continent. And while, of course, this is a reason to celebrate, I am also immediately asking myself, what does that mean? Is that a trend? And now we have put we've done that, and what about the next Nobel Prize? Like, how long will it take for the next Booker Prize to ever go to a black female writer, for example? She even had to share, Bernardine Evaristo even had to share that prize. So these things raise new questions. Is it a trend that we see for 10 years now? Because there's always funding involved. And that, as I mentioned before, is a political question. How much funding is really there? Like, can we in Berlin, who all run to the same institutions and apply at the same funding institutions, can we all be still funded in the next years so that we can build something that is significantly showing African voices? Or is it something that I can do for 1 year and then I have to apply again, and then there's another year that I don't get anything, like you just described as well from Soweto? This is a reality that we all have to deal with. And I personally think that when Abdulrazak Gurna, he received the Nobel Prize for Literature, it was quite significant how that was presented in the media. It was really something that triggers some thoughts. Like yesterday, a Hungarian writer, for example, but when it was Gurna, the Die Zeit, for example, titled, quite frankly, Does Anyone Know Him? Taz as well, Who Knows Gurna? And it was really interesting because not only does this speak to the ignorance of those who are writing about literature, and it's not even shameful to not know him. You shouldn't be asking that. If you don't know know Gunnar, then go and read, like he just won the Nobel Prize, so please. But no, we put it on the front cover, and it speaks to the kind of arrogance as well. Like, it's okay not to know someone like Abdurrazak Gunnar, It's just like, okay, do you know? This kind of attitude is something that worries me a lot, because it also says we don't appreciate. So if, say, Bonaventure is no longer the curator of the HKW, how long will it take for the next African descent or black man or woman to take up that position? I'm worried that we put a dot behind it and said, okay, now we've given the prize, moving on, and then for a long time there's nothing. So I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I also think we should be realistic about these things.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I believe the Tsitsi Dangarembga story is one of the greatest success stories that your festival really triggered for her to have this visibility. But let's talk about the more economic factors of making festivals. You already touched upon it a little bit, and you too, by saying the Abantu Festival relied very heavily on private donors. So I would like to know, well, organizing a festival, first of all, it costs a lot of money. You have to have the location, you have the travel costs for the writers that come, honoraries, technical support, and so on. But in the best of cases, a festival would also generate some value. Of course, a lot of symbolic value, but writers do also come to sell their books, right? So in the best of cases, they have some gain, and maybe even the organizers, I don't know, you can tell me. But you already mentioned there is a struggle for subsidies that many people are applying to organize things, and right now in Germany we are even in a crisis around that. But in general, what are the subsidies from the state in Germany that you can apply for and rely on, more or less? Or is it really that every year it's absolutely uncertain what you can get? And then in South Africa, is there also any support from the state that festival makers can apply for?
I think that I mentioned before that a festival like ours is also a political act. So I think it's very important that I would like to really underline that buying books or reading books is not a hobby. It is really a political act. Each book that you buy these days is very, very important. And I think in times of peace, we forget how much impact they have, how much power they have. But it is not, we don't have to go very far to know that every authoritarian regime always goes first to the books. That's like almost a logical way to go. And banning and burning of books is something that is not in the past. We don't have to walk far to Bibelplatz. We Germans know a lot about how much pressure is put, especially on those who write and who think, because writing, reading, and thinking goes hand in hand, and that is something that really threatens power. And we see that in the USA at the moment as well, with the books that are being banned, for example, right now, 2025. And so a book festival in itself should be an initiative which I wish we had more political support. It should be an absolute logical approach to put a lot of funding into the cultural sector in Germany, but it's not. And for example, there are other countries like Austria, they have a state funded for publishers. I find that we can debate these things. Like the Germans, for example, uniquely have a prize, the Buchpreisbindung. We have governmentally a law that says every book has to cost the same. The publisher prices the book, and that book costs in my shop as much as it costs in the shop next door, and so on and so forth. Something that is quite unique, and the idea, of course, behind it is a nice idea. But it also puts, of course, it has also a downside. It puts people who are in the shops, like a bookshop, for example, it reduces the flexibility of a bookshop. If my landlord increases the rent and I sell jeans, then I can make the jeans a bit more expensive. If I sell books, there's no way I can do that. So just to give one example. So publishers, bookshops, book festivals, and writers in I think significantly are still really looking into hardship when it comes to economics. That's you can see it also in the statistics. Frankfurt, as the largest book fair in the world, I've heard shocking statistics before. I think about 70% or something. Please check that number. I'm not good with numbers, but it was a very high percentage of people who go to the Frankfurt Book Fair every year and who are in the book business, but who do not live from books. They cannot make a living. Most of the independent publishers in Germany as well, they cannot make a living. They all have other jobs that pays the rent and significantly also pays the books. So it is more of a passion, and a belief, and it is a political act, as I said. If you publish books, then you want to achieve something with it, and it is something that often relies on really very small, sometimes even one-person companies that are called publishing house and who work somewhere else and put all their money and invest it into the books that they publish and the translations as well.
Well, I get it, I got it, that the book sales are not so important for the author, but more for the publishing houses or maybe the bookstore. But still, I remember that in the last book festival, at some point, your new novel, The City Is Mine, was sold out, which is, I guess, for a writer, it's a nice experience to see that many people are buying the book. So is this something that often happens during the festival, that there is like a peak of interest and then the sales will go up? And for you who has the bookshop and the festival, how important is the festival, the sales that you do during the festival, maybe to even make the bookstore survive over the year?
The festival for us is like a second Christmas.
Okay.
So the way the book industry works for bookshops, of course, Christmas is the most important part of the year. Please all go and buy books. No other presents. Forget about everything else, buy books. So it's very important for every bookshop, of course, the season towards the end of the year. For us, it's a second season, basically, that is very important. Why the book is sold out, of course, for him, he might be happy about it. Me as a bookseller, I'm not happy about it. It means I haven't planned well, I should have had so many more books, I don't know. This is something that, you don't know what the readers really are interested in, right? So, but I'm keeping a close watch because it tells you also the trends. Like if people love romance and with the vampire that is hot, something like that, it will show definitely in the festival at the stand of the books. It will sell. So I know that, this is something that people are currently very much interested in.
Oh, Nick, sorry, can you get back to the question if in South Africa the state supports festival? Is there some funding you can apply for or not at all?
Yeah, I think to get into that, I would like to talk about two major festivals in South Africa. I think number one, this is my rating, and in terms of how known the festival is and how much attended, and also the international audience and the international writers that they can invite. So it's bigger in that way. It's called Open Book. It's in Cape Town. So I think a month ago, I received an email from one of the organizers, Mervyn, to say that the government is not going to sponsor it again. Which is a sad thing, because that was the festival that everyone was looking forward to go to. So they won't continue. I think they were sponsoring them for 3 years or something. It's something that I'm not sure. But that major sponsor has withdrawn from it. And of course, it's going to affect the shape of the festival, it will affect the way, the kind of writers that they invite to come to this, to talk about books. So that's one thing. The government, yes, it's involved, but its involvement, for instance, in South Africa, we have a Ministry of Arts and Culture, which many people think like, compared to other African states, this is unique. But it depends on who is in it, You put a minister who has not read a book, or the minister, for instance, who you still have to, who does not know how to differentiate between an author of a novel and a journalist, for instance. And a minister who always thinks like art only has to do on performance, like music and stuff like that. So that's how the festivals, the sponsorship of government and the impact of the government in terms of sponsoring these festivals is eroding. One of the biggest festivals, one of the biggest festivals in South Africa, the book prize is called the Sunday Times Book Prize. So Sunday Times is a newspaper that used to sponsor one of the festivals called Franschhoek Festival. So when it started in the mid 2007 to 2006, 7, and so on, it was well sponsored. Even the winery in Cape, because it's around the area of Cape Town where there's wine and whatever. Even the wine companies, will be there, will be part of the stakeholders. But Sunday Times has withdrawn ahead, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Why? Because it has gone digital. Newspapers, as we know them, traditional way, they are eroding. So they've gone digital, many of them, and there are lots of sources that people get the news from. So it's no longer as much as vibrant and money-making as it used to be. So that's one of the things. And then you'll find that I was invited at the Franschhoek Festival, was this year or last year? Yeah, I think this year. One of the things, this is a festival that I've been invited to, more than 5 times or so. For the first time, they tell you that you have to move yourself from the airport to the festival venue. If you miss this bus that is to take everyone, and that I've realized that it's because they said exactly that we lack sponsorship at a particular moment. The sponsors are also withdrawing. I don't know whether there's a perspective of this sponsor now. They have to sponsor something else. In order to sponsor a festival, maybe they have to sponsor a podcast, for instance, and other things that are the route towards disseminating literature. So, as I also said about the festival, is also no longer in the picture because of that kind of sponsorship, government sponsorship, which has just been taken away, even including our own festival. So coming to the point of, now I'm coming to the point of book sales. Stephanie made a very good point there that it has nothing to do with the writer. Before I came here, one of the things that I used to do, I'm known for, is putting all my books on a boat of my car and then drive around, go to a shebeen and then sell to people that are drinking. Whether I bring the money or not, those are the things that I'll be known for. So I used to do that. That's how you gain as an author. But when you talk, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that the book was sold out. Yeah. But how many copies? We're talking about 6 copies here.
Okay. A bit more.
I think you're too humble here.
But that's the nature of the thing. So but I'm so glad that there's an institution like African Book Festival, where Intercontinental Bookshop, whereby when I come, because my gain as a writer, to come to Berlin, it's a speculatory kind of a gain. I am hoping that, for me to sacrifice everything here and go to Berlin, maybe I might meet a publisher, a translator. Maybe they might sign me immediately and say, here's 20,000 euros, which when I translate into rands, it makes greater sense, So you come here, you load your books, into your bags, and then only to find that people in Berlin know this particular. They don't go mostly to things that they don't know. So sometimes I'm just me, but there are points whereby people come and buy, and then they pick up books that not yours, or sometimes there's a book signing, and then the queue of the other writer is up until there. Yours is just people coming to ask you, what are your books about? Such kind of things. So those are the kind of realities in the writing world. So yes, sponsorship definitely. The sponsors nowadays, I don't know what's happening, more especially in South African context, because we used to have so many, but we still have so many. And I'm not saying this. There are certain sponsorships that you can apply. Like, for instance, in South Africa, we've got a lotto, for instance, lotto board. You can apply. Most of the festivals are surviving because of the lotto sponsorship. So you can go to the lotto sponsor, but it's all
lotto. You mean
lotto,
the game?
The game.
Okay.
Yeah. So National Lottery Foundation and whatever, you can apply there to. That's how many people are surviving in art in South Africa. But also that, as we say, money has eyes. So if you don't belong to the right kind of people, there's corruption in there as well, within the board itself. So there's a lot of things that are happening. So, but we live with hope.
Yeah. Thank you so much for all these insights.